6 months from now, you will either be the same person repeating the same ingrained patterns, or you will become a version of yourself you scarcely recognize in the most constructive way. Carl Jung identified the specific psychological process that governs which path unfolds. He named it individuation, and he carefully charted how the psyche restructures itself once you stop resisting it and begin cooperating with it. This shift doesn't require years or decades. It can unfold over a matter of months when approached deliberately. Are you ready to use the next 6 months intentionally instead of replaying old patterns? Comment 1 if you have ever committed to a focused inner experiment like this. Comment 2 if you felt stuck repeating cycles and want this to be the first time you truly change them. If you feel these psychology sharings are helpful and relatable, you're welcome to become a channel member and stay with us on a deeper journey. As a member, you'll get early and extended access to more in-depth practical content that you can apply in everyday life. Jung grasped a truth that many therapists rarely state. Plainly deep psychological change is not typically a slow, linear slope. It occurs in discontinuous surges. Step changes when you cross crucial psychological thresholds, and the system reorganizes at a new level. I'm about to outline Jung's 6-month transformation protocol, the very framework he used with patients who arrived stuck depressed and directionless, and who left with a fundamentally altered way of being anchored in lasting shifts rather than superficial tweaks. This is not generic self-help, nor is it mere positive thinking. It is about activating the underlying psychological mechanisms that catalyze durable, irreversible transformation, grounded in the structure of the psyche itself. Here is what makes Jung's approach distinctive. You do not change by piling new habits and hacks onto your life. You change by integrating what already exists within you, material waiting in the unconscious that has been pressing to reshape you from the inside out. The next 6 months will pass regardless. The only real question is whether you will use them intentionally to move toward who you truly are, rather than drifting along old tracks. Here's why most people fail to change. In a meaningful way, they attempt to repair their lives without engaging the psyche itself. They reshuffle outer circumstances, a new job, a new relationship, a new city, yet carry the same internal patterns into every setting, reproducing the same outcomes. Jung witnessed this repeatedly. People came to him after trying seemingly everything new careers, partners, and lifestyles, only to find nothing truly shifted because they themselves were the constant factor threading through every scenario. They hauled their unconscious patterns into each new situation, reconstructing the same relational dynamics and colliding with the same walls, no matter how different the surface details looked. You likely recognize this. You quit a toxic workplace only to encounter identical patterns in the next one. You exit a dysfunctional relationship, yet attract the same archetype in a different form. You relocate across the country, and before long, you have rebuilt the very life you meant to leave behind. Jung's insight was radical. You do not transform your life by merely changing circumstances. You transform it by changing your relationship with the unconscious, the unseen driver shaping your choices and reactions. The unconscious runs most of the show functionally, the vast majority of your mental life. Until you bring it into awareness, you are effectively a puppet who believes you are pulling the strings, mistaking compulsion for control. Yet here's the part rarely emphasized. Your unconscious is not trying to keep you stuck. It is actively attempting to transform you, pressing for integration through repeating themes and unresolved tensions. The patterns that recur are not punishments. They are messages. The symptoms you experience are not mere problems. They are nascent solutions, trying to emerge, signaling the next step your psyche needs you to take. When your life feels fundamentally misaligned, that sensation is your psyche calling for transformation. The decisive question for the next 6 months is whether you will resist the unconscious or collaborate with it, because that choice governs everything that follows. As Jung put it, you can't change what you can't see. Therefore, the first 2 months focus on rendering the unconscious conscious, specifically confronting your shadow, the repository of disowned parts. Your shadow is not simply a bad side. It comprises every part you rejected to stay acceptable, the anger you suppressed to appear kind, the ambition you concealed to seem humble, the sensitivity you buried to look strong. Exiled to the shadow, these elements continue to influence your life from behind the scenes. Here is Jung's 60-day method for mapping the shadow. First, for 2 months, identify your triggers. Record every strong emotional reaction to others, the person who infuriates you, the trait you cannot tolerate, the behavior that elicits disproportionate anger. Write each instance down. These are not merely observations about them. They are your shadow announcing itself. Have you noticed specific people or traits that trigger outsized reactions in you lately? Comment 1 if you have already tracked triggers and spotted a pattern. Comment 2 if you've experienced triggers but haven't mapped them yet. The arrogant person you despise may mirror your disowned confidence. The needy individual who repels you may reveal your rejected vulnerability. The selfish person who activates you may highlight your suppressed capacity for self-care. In short, your triggers serve as GPS coordinates for your shadow. Second, monitor your projections. Notice when you are utterly convinced that someone else is wrong, bad, or the problem. The stronger your certainty, the more likely you are projecting unconscious material onto them, rather than seeing them clearly. Jung discovered that we rarely perceive others as they are. Instead, we cast our own unconscious content onto them, as if they were movie screens, then react to our projection. One of Jung's patients spent 2 months tracking triggers and uncovered something startling. Everyone he labeled weak was in fact displaying real courage through vulnerability, an ability he had fully rejected in himself. His aversion to weakness was actually a rejection of his own suppressed need for connection. Third, scrutinize your admiration. The shadow doesn't only contain traits you dislike, it also holds positive qualities you have disowned. The people you pedestalize, and the attributes you revere, yet deem unattainable, that is your golden shadow. You have projected your own unrealized potential onto others. During these 2 months, resist the urge to fix anything. You are building a psychological inventory of every part you have exiled. Jung observed that clearly seeing the shadow itself initiates change as awareness reorganizes your inner system. By the close of month 2, you will hold a working map of your unconscious material. You'll know what you have been projecting, what you have been suppressing, and what has been steering you from the shadows. That is the moment when the deeper work truly begins. With the map in hand, months 3 and 4 turn to integration. Jung's approach here is revolutionary. You do not battle the shadow or attempt to eradicate it. You enter dialogue with it, cultivate relationship, and weave it back into the whole of your personality. This is where Jung's technique of active imagination becomes indispensable. You will engage in genuine conversations with the parts you have rejected. It may sound unusual until you discover that these parts hold intelligence, reasons for their strategies, and gifts you urgently need to recover. Here is the process. Select one identified shadow aspect, say your rejected anger. Sit quietly, close your eyes, and allow the anger to take on an image of its own. It might appear as a fire, a warrior, or a tantruming child. Do not force it. Let it reveal itself in its own form. Then speak to it. Ask, why are you in my life? What do you need me to know? What gift are you trying to give me? And listen, truly. Listen, not only with logic, but with your psychological ear receptive to feeling and image. Jung practiced this with his own shadow and uncovered something profound. His rejected aggression was not pushing him toward violence. It was offering the strength to set firm boundaries. His suppressed selfishness was not urging cruelty. It was teaching him how to preserve himself appropriately. One of Jung's patients, a chronic people-pleaser who couldn't say no, spent month 3 dialoguing with her shadow. She discovered a fierce inner protector buried since childhood, a part that knew exactly how to set boundaries but had been exiled as mean. Through dialogue, she did not become harsh. She became boundaried. The same energy, transformed once integrated. Month 4 centers on practical integration. You begin to express shadow qualities consciously in small contained ways. The person who rejected anger practices firm boundary setting. The one who suppressed ambition takes one concrete step toward a personal goal. The individual who denied sensitivity permits a daily moment of honest vulnerability. You are not becoming the shadow. You are reclaiming the energy trapped within it. Each quality you integrate returns usable power. Every once rejected part that you befriend ceases to sabotage you from the unconscious and begins to cooperate with your aims. By the end of month 4, you are notably different. You have access to energies and capacities you may not have felt for years or even decades. You are more whole, more potent, and more authentically yourself. Yet Jung regarded this as preparation for the deeper shift to come. The final 2 months are where the decisive change occurs. Jung called this the activation of the transcendent function, the point at which conscious and unconscious stop contending and begin collaborating to bring forth a new, more integrated self. By month 5, with your shadow mapped and partly integrated, something remarkable unfolds. The tension between who you have been and who you are becoming reaches a critical mass. Your old identity cannot contain the new material. The ego structure begins to crack. This is frightening, and it is precisely what must occur for growth. Jung termed this the death of the ego, not physical death, but the dissolution of the false self, so that the true self can emerge and take its rightful place. Month 5 is about sustaining this tension without rushing to resolve it. You are at once the person you have always been and the person now coming into being. You hold both states without prematurely choosing, generating immense psychological pressure, akin to being pregnant with yourself. Jung found that when you consciously maintain this tension, neither fleeing to old patterns nor forcing a quick fix, the psyche produces something unexpected, a third option, a new identity that includes all you have been, yet surpasses it in coherence and freedom. Practically, this means you will encounter situations where the old self would react one way, while the emerging self urges another. Do not choose immediately. Hold both responses. Feel the old pattern and the new possibility at once. Remain present within that seemingly impossible tension. Have you ever felt between selves, holding the old reaction and the new possibility at the same time? Comment 1. If you have experienced that liminal tension and stayed with it. Comment 2. If you tend to choose quickly and want to practice holding both states longer. One of Jung's patients described month 5 as living between worlds. She was no longer the habitual people-pleaser she had been, but not yet. Yet, she was also not fully the boundaried person she was becoming. In practice, every interaction demanded that she hold this inner tension without collapsing into old reflexes, and each decision felt like a contraction, painful but necessary, on the way to something new being born. Month 6 is the period when the new you solidifies and takes clear form. Jung referred to this as the birth of the self with a capital S, indicating not a polished or improved ego, but an entirely different organizing principle for your psyche, a center that reorients how your inner life coheres. At this stage, your behavior is no longer primarily driven by others' opinions, social expectations, or the scripts laid down by past trauma. Instead, motivation begins to arise from a deeper, truer core, something essentially you aligned with your authentic values and inner direction. This shift does not unfold as a slow gradient. It arrives abruptly. At some point in month 6, you notice sometimes in a single morning that you feel different down to the bone. Situations that once set you off now pass without the old charge. Long-standing patterns simply cease to run the show. Choices arise from a deeper locus of awareness you hadn't recognized before. Jung experienced this kind of crossing personally and captured it in the line, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." Crucially, the choosing he names does not originate in the ego's willpower. It springs from the self that emerges when the conscious and unconscious stand in living dialogue and alignment. Across the entire 6-month arc, Jung emphasized 2 daily practices that markedly accelerate change: consistent dream work and vigilant tracking of synchronicities. Each morning, record your dreams in detail. Rather than forcing a purely logical interpretation, approach them psychologically through image emotion and association. Dreams function as direct communications from the unconscious, signaling what is transforming, what parts are resisting, and what new elements are trying to emerge. Jung observed that dream content shifts noticeably as the process unfolds. In month 1, chase dreams are common, reflecting the shadow seeking your attention. By month 3, dreams often include confrontations, symbolic encounters with previously rejected aspects. Around month 5, themes of death and birth appear, mirroring the ego's dissolution and the self's emergence. By month 6, dreams frequently depict arrival in a new place, the psyche's way of confirming a completed transition. One crucial point: do more than record your dreams. Enter into dialogue with them. Ask figures what they signify, and re-enter the scene through active imagination to explore or revise outcomes. Dreams are not merely messages to decode. They are interactive instruments of transformation when you engage them consciously. Parallel to dream work, keep a log of synchronicities, those meaning-laden coincidences that feel uncannily relevant. As interchange gathers momentum, such events tend to amplify. A book randomly presents precisely the message you need. A person appears with the exact answer to your dilemma. A fitting opportunity surfaces at the moment you are prepared to receive it. Jung held that synchronicities are not mere accidents. They signal the collective unconscious resonating with your individual process. As your inner configuration shifts, the outer field seems to reorganize correspondingly, mirroring the new pattern you are embodying. One patient who meticulously tracked synchronicities over 6 months noticed a striking trend in month 1. He recorded perhaps 1 per week, while by month 6, he observed several each day. The pattern suggested that his internal transformation was altering how reality appeared to respond to him. Maintain a synchronicity journal, not to gather proof for others, but to remind yourself that transformation is not exclusively internal. You are changing in context and in relationship. The process unfolds within a wider field that participates in your becoming. These practices are not superstitions. They function as psychological technologies that keep you in stable conscious contact with the unconscious. They help you remain aligned with the deeper process, particularly when the ego is tempted to pull the plug and revert to old defenses. Jung identified a threshold that is both daunting and thrilling around month 4. The transformation becomes effectively irreversible. You cross what he termed the point of no return. You cannot fully revert to the prior identity, even if you try. This also explains why many people unconsciously derail their progress near month 3. Sensing the imminent threshold, the ego panics at the prospect of losing its central control and manufactures crises, dramas, or plausible excuses to halt the work. You can recognize the approach of this threshold when aspects of your life begin to unravel. Relationships that match the old self no longer function. Jobs that fit a false identity become intolerable. Structures founded on unconscious patterns start to collapse under their own weight. Importantly, this is not failure, it is progress. The old life is dissolving precisely because it rested on an inauthentic foundation. That scaffolding must fall away to make room for a life that is real and structurally sound. Jung named this necessary descent, the night sea journey, emphasizing that passage through darkness is required in order to reach the light of a new dawn. Here is the empowering part. Once you cross the point of no return, the process tends to carry itself forward. You no longer need to force outcomes. The accumulated psychological momentum advances the work. Conscious and unconscious now collaborate toward one aim, your individuation. Jung observed hundreds of patients reach this juncture. Some turned back preferring familiar suffering to uncertain change. Those who continued, however, emerged not as upgraded versions of the old identity, but as fundamentally different people, a genuinely new self. One woman described passing this point. She woke one morning unable to remember how to perform her former identity. It felt like squeezing into childhood clothes beyond not fitting. She could no longer understand why she had ever worn them in the first place. This is the paradox of genuine transformation. You cannot keep the old life and simply bolt on improvements. The old self must die for the new self to be born. Once that dying begins, often around month 4, the process tends to complete itself, regardless of your preference or timing. To summarize, Jung's 6-month protocol is not abstract theory. It is a precise sequence. Months 1-2 focus on mapping the shadow, identifying the parts of yourself you have exiled. You can't change what you can't see. Therefore, you begin by rendering unconscious material conscious. Months 3, your 4 center on dialogue and integration through active imagination. In this phase, you reclaim the energy and strengths that were previously projected onto other people and weave them back into your own personality. Months 5-6 mark the activation of the transcendent function. The old identity dissolves, and the true self is born. You begin to live as who you are in essence, rather than as the person conditioning and programming once dictated. Throughout the entire process, you track dreams and synchronicities to maintain an ongoing conscious relationship with the unconscious. This keeps you aligned with a deeper movement, especially in moments when the ego rebels. The aim is not incremental self-improvement. It is becoming yourself, perhaps for the first time, by allowing the authentic center to lead. Jung concluded that many people pass through life without ever encountering their true self. They reach the end, having enacted someone else's values and dreams, never fully inhabiting their own. Yet within 6 months, if you follow the sequence, and refuse to retreat at the threshold, you can counteract years of inauthentic living. You can integrate the shadow, activate the self, and begin to operate from your true center. The immediate decision is, this: are you willing to let the previous identity die so the intended self can live? That is the offer of the next 6 months. Not mere improvement, but transformation. Not just better circumstances, but a different you who relates to circumstances in a new way. Not simply a new life, but a real one perhaps for the first time. Jung showed that this transformation is available to those prepared to do the psychological work, not only surface-level habits and goals, but the deeper labor of shadow integration and individuation. It is less about the ego's pursuit of success and more about the soul's work of becoming oneself. The next 6 months will pass regardless. Half a year from now, you will either be facing the same patterns and problems with the same sense of misalignment, or you will be someone it's hard to remember not being, someone who has integrated the shadow, contacted the self, and begun living from the true center. The process is demanding. Charting the shadow can be uncomfortable. Integrating exiled parts may feel destabilizing. Allowing the false self to die is often frightening. But Jung discovered a crucial fact. The discomfort is temporary, while the transformation endures. Once a shadow element is truly integrated, it remains integrated. Once the self emerges, it does not retreat. Once individuation has occurred, you cannot simply unintegrate and return to the earlier state. The person who emerges after 6 months is more stable, authentic, and steady. You do not need perfect conditions to begin. No extra time, money, or special support is required. What you need is willingness to face yourself honestly, to dialogue with your shadow, and to allow the transformation to proceed. Your psyche already contains the blueprint for this work. Jung simply articulated the map. 6 months can be enough to change nearly everything, not by brute force, but through integration. Not by doing more, but by moving toward inner wholeness. The clock starts the moment you choose it to. If you intend to undertake this 6-month transformation, continue learning the key techniques of individuation, especially active imagination, so you can engage the unconscious directly and amplify your progress through consistent practice. From that moment, the process is no longer merely, I change me, but a shift of a deeper axis. The self reordering your entire frame of living. You begin to notice the roles persona that once helped you adapt now feel too tight. They aren't discarded, but reassigned to a supportive place. The shadow is no longer a saboteur. It becomes raw energy, serving boundaries, courage, and creativity. The pull between opposites, reason, feeling strength, tenderness, giving, receiving, anima, shake animus, doesn't demand a lopsided solution. The transcendent function allows a third form to emerge, one that includes and surpasses both. You also start to perceive a subtle order between inner and outer synchronicities. Cease to be random, becoming responses from the collective unconscious to the cadence of your transformation. And as your inner orientation clarifies goals, relationships, and work, self-select. What accords with essence remains. What belongs to the old life falls away. This is not a burst of temporary motivation. It is a new architecture of psychic life, less wasteful, more meaningful, durable, and true. Remember, 6 months pass quickly. Use them intentionally, and you will meet the life that has been waiting on the far side of this process. Will you start your 6-month individuation clock? Now comment 1. If you have ever completed a deliberate inner journey on a clear timeline. Comment 2. If you're choosing today as your day 1. If you'd love to keep receiving more meaningful videos about psychology healing and understanding yourself better, consider supporting the channel by becoming a member. Your registration not only unlocks more valuable content for you, but also gives me the motivation to keep creating and sharing regularly.